And, I feel like sometimes the conscious community, the Kemetic community here in Cameroon, they feel like there's a Professor Dukaya in every country in Africa. And I'm here to tell you that it's just not the case. Okay, just for all the new people that's their first time seeing MAAXERU TEP, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. Number one, I have 2 books out. My first book is MAAXERU Kemetic Soulism, Exposes the Diabolical System of Global European Imperialism. This book came out, I started writing this book when I was in my 20s in the 1980s. My new book is Smaitai, The Procreative Duality of Eternal Oneness versus the Politics of Western Hypnosis. This is a very large book. It's almost 1,000 pages, 72 chapters. It's a lot of information in this book. This book came out at the end of 2015. So in literary terms, this book is still a new book. It's a lot of information in this book. And I'm not saying that because I wrote the book, I'm saying it because I really know what's in the book. Last time I was here in April, I think I brought, because of the weight of the books, I couldn't bring that many books. But if you want to get information about how to purchase Smaitai, I'll leave my contact information at the end. Also, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I was born and raised in America. I was born in the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. From 4 to 7, I lived in Western Pennsylvania. From the age of 7, I moved to Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. is where I still reside to this very day. I'm careful not to say I come from America, because in the English language, the preposition from is a very tricky preposition. It connotes origin, foundation, and root. And no melanated African person who lives in any diaspora, whether that diaspora is Brazil, Jamaica, America, France, Belgium, our chemical, genetic, cultural, spiritual origin is only in one geographical place on this world, and that is the continent of Africa. One thing when I come to Africa, because I've been to many African countries, I always find myself correcting African people when they identify me with the Western labels, such as a Black American, an African American. These are Western-induced synthetic labels. There's no such thing as a Black American. An African-centered, conscious African person who lives in the diaspora is a very insulting word, because Black is a color, it's not a culture. It's a very important color in our culture, but Black is still just a color. And there's no such thing as an African and an American. You can't be an African and an American because it's 2 opposing forces. One of the first laws of physical nature is that 2 opposing forces cannot occupy the same space. The only way 2 opposing forces, and history is the best example to explain why these forces are opposing. African people, if you look at our history, we always had a spiritual affinity with nature. We cultivate nature, we defend nature, we protect nature, we maintain the balance of ma'at, we maintain the balance of nature. But if you look at the European history, the European life force from the cave all the way up till tomorrow, you see an opposing force. So you see in European race, you see a people who have always profited from the exploitation of nature, who have always contaminated, have always dehumanized and criminalized nature. So basically we're talking about 2 opposing forces. And the only way 2 opposing forces can share the same space is if one force surrenders to the authority of another force. And that's basically the dynamic that we have in America. Yeah, because once you surrender to the opposing force, by default, you already proclamate yourself as the weaker force, and you also proclamate the other force as the stronger force. The stronger force can set the conditions for surrender. And that's what we deal with in America. And part of those conditions is that we have to give up everything African. Everything African has to go. We have to give up our African names, our African dress, our African history, our African connection to our Africans. So these are the conditions of surrender. We've been in America 25 generations, and it's 2018, and we still, 95% of the diaspora Africans in America still name their children after the white man. Why? Because these are the conditions of surrender. And according to the white man, these conditions are non-negotiable and they are eternal. Let me talk about my DNA test. So in 2010, I did a DNA test with a very highly qualified African-owned DNA testing company in America called AfricanAncestry.com. So I first did the X chromosome, the maternal DNA bloodline, through my mother's mother, going back 2,000 to 3,000 years. And you know, they send you the packet in the mail, you swab your mouth, you send it back, and in 6 weeks you get the result. So in 6 weeks, I got the result back, and the results was 99.9% for the Mende people of Sierra Leone. So then 6 months later, I did the Y chromosome, which is the paternal line, which follows your father's DNA from the father, his father, going back 2,000 to 3,000 years. And it came back 99.9% for the Iwando of Cameroon. So I am your Cameroon brother. In America, if there is any political mechanism or political tool in society, in America, that is responsible for reconnecting the mind of African people in America to the continent of Africa and African ancestors, you can rest assured there's going to be a swift negative reaction by the white supremacists who own and operate the politics that governs over everything and everybody in America. So to counter the great work that AfricanAncestry.com is doing in America by reconnecting the DNA from diaspora African people to their African roots in Africa, the white man, the Europeans, created an Ancestry.com. So now Ancestry, the white-owned DNA testing company, is going out to solicit, right, for diaspora African people in America to take their test, because their test is designed to only take your DNA back to the point of bastardization. So they are going out their way to make sure there is a blockade between diaspora African people and Africa, because America, in their psyche, cannot stay America if 60 million diaspora African people return home to invest their minds and possibly their finances in Africa. Now, so let's get started. Today's presentation is why we are Kemetic and the astronomical origin of all religions. When I say all religions, I'm basically just talking about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Why we are Kemetic is a very good question. And it is a question that every African person who is walking down the Kemetic legacy, walking down this path, is going to have to explain to somebody, mostly people who are trying to learn about the Kemetic legacy, whether it be relatives, whether it be friends, whether it be co-workers, right? Because if we want the next generation to learn about their ancestral legacy from a Kemetic perspective, we as adults in this room have to be prepared to explain it. So the question is, why is Kemet necessary? Why is Kemet so important? And I want to start off by saying that the Kemetic ancestors, the Kem2, they did not start out as a monolithic people. The people that we read the books in the back about, the people that we write about, did not start out in Kemet as a monolithic, as one people. The Kemetic African, the Kem2, the descendants of the Anu, started out in the south as segregated, separate nations, separate ethnic groups that for some miraculous reason unified to become one. And as one, they were called the Anu. It was the Baka of Cameroon, the Aka of the Congo, the Fang people of Gabon, the Shalak people of southern Sudan, the Twa people of the Congo. They're also in Burundi, they're also in Uganda. These separate entities, these separate ethnic groups, these separate African nations unified to become one people called the Anu. And this unification took place on what they call the Mountains of the Moon, which is today the Rwenzori Mountains that are on the Congo-Uganda mountain range. Now this is important because the Rwenzori, or the Mountains of the Moon, is a mountain range that produced the glaciers that fed into what is now known as the River Happy, or the Nile River, starting the Nile River thousands and thousands of years ago. So the Anu, the original people of Kemet, the people that migrated from southern Africa below the equator and unified as multiple groups, unified into one. And as one, and only as one did they begin to migrate northward above the African equator into the region known to us today as Kemetic. The Anu built cities all up and down the River Hapi, or the Nile River. They built a city. One of the earliest cities built in Kemet was Waset. In fact, when you fly into Cairo today, the airport in Cairo is in Heliopolis. In Heliopolis, that means helium, the sun, because the original name of the city was Anu. So Anu is not only the name of the original people of Kemet, but it tells us that the name of the original people was the sun people. They were the first sun people, because Anu represents the city of the sun. Now, let's be clear. When we're talking about the sun, we're talking about the sun time cycle. That the first people of the sun time cycle was the Anu. They were the first people of the sun. Now, in the history of Africa, we lived in 3 time cycles. And when I say time cycle, I mean this is how African people told time. It was not the conventional Western way that we tell time today. Time was determined by environmental cycles that were influenced by cosmic cycles. The seasons is an environmental cycle. The rains and subsequently the floods are environmental cycle. The time when you till the soil, the time when you plant the seed, the time when you pick the harvest. Now, the first time cycle was the Seba, or the star time cycle. This means that the rising, the motion and setting of stars and planets is what first influenced environmental cycles. And that's how our African people at the very beginning, millions of years ago, told time. As we evolved as African people, the star time cycle, the rising and setting of stars gave way to the moon, the rising, motion, setting of the moon, and the impact that the 8 phases of the moon, from new moon to full moon, has on environmental cycles. The time cycle modified and moved from the Seba time cycle to the moon time cycle to the time cycle that we live in today. The sun is the highest form of manifestation of Tawi. Think about heat, for example. Think about heat. Heat rises, right? Heat rises. And as heat rises, the heat becomes more intense. Okay? As it becomes more intense, it becomes more powerful. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to what I'm getting ready to say. So, as the sun rises in the east, as a result of unification of hydrogen and helium, as it rises in the east, its power increases. And that increased power begins to impact the environmental universe, which is regulated by nature and empowered by the sun. Think about the Anu, the original people of Kemet. Because remember, the Anu are the melanated descendants of the sun. So when the Anu formed in the mountains of the moon, right, in the Uganda, Congo, Ethiopia region, when they form and begin to migrate or elevate northward above the African equator, just like the sun rises in the east. Now, inside the head of every African person, inside the head exists the brain universe. Brain universe. The brain universe is regulated by the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is empowered by the miniature sun, the microcosm of the sun in the form of the atom, or as our Kemetic ancestors referred to it as Atum. So, as the Anu, now a one unit, as a result of unification, as they begin to migrate northward, the atom in the pineal gland also began to elevate in the pineal gland. This caused an increased and elevated amount of high-powered energy and power to now impact all the brain organs in the brain, such as the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala, the cerebellum. So I don't want this point to go without you understanding exactly what I'm saying. So the sun rising, increasing power, impacting the environmental universe, which is regulated by nature and empowered by the sun. So you see, African people, this explains why our Kemetic ancestors were masters of the sciences. Because they had an elevated consciousness. Now to me, science is the explanation of how and why everything in the universe is connected. The means of connection might be physiology, anthropology, astronomy. All these are means of connectivity, connecting the cosmos to the environment, to the animals, to the ancestors, to the African. You know, in 2012, I spent some time with the Maasai, and I asked the Maasai, explain to me African spirituality. I just flew in from America. I don't know nothing about African spirituality. And the Maasai will tell you, they will give you a very thorough explanation of spirituality, but it will be in storybook form. And the characters in the story will be Maasai. The language in the story will be Maasai. And the theater in which everything takes place will be in Maasai land. So if you're not a Maasai, you don't feel connected to the Maasai spirituality. Also in 2011, I spent some time with the Igbo in Nigeria. I don't know nothing about African spirituality. Can you please explain African spirituality to me? Well, first of all, if you can find an Igbo that is not a Christian, good luck. But if, let's say you do, the Igbo will give you a very thorough explanation of African spirituality. It'll be in storybook form. The characters in the story will be Igbo. The language will be Igbo. And the theater in which everything takes place in their spirituality will be in Igbo land. And the same goes when I was talking to the Xhosa in South Africa and the Zulu in South Africa. But, if you go to the Kemetic ancestors and you ask the Kemetic ancestors, the Kemetu, the descendants of the Anu, if you ask the Kemetic ancestors, give me an explanation of African spirituality. And they too will give you a very thorough explanation of African spirituality. But it won't be in a book. It will be in 1,000 books. And each book out of the 1,000 represents a science. And each science can define every attribute of your being as an African person. No other culture in the history of this world has produced more information about who we are as African people, how we got here as African people, and why spiritually we are African people more than the Kemetic African, more than the Kemetu. Thousands of writings on the temple walls, thousands of writings on papyri, thousands of writings on the columns. No other culture has given you the quantity of explanation of self more than the Kemetu. So my question is this: if I want to learn everything about myself, and there's a bookstore on this side, and there's a man over there with one book locked into a little time period, where would I go to learn everything about my existence, my family, my community, my environment, my ancestry? Would I go to the bookstore with 1,000 books, or will I go to the man holding the book on the corner? And you see African people. That is why we are Kemetic, because Kemet represents the best of our culture, and Kemet has produced more information about who we are and why we are as African people than any other culture. So now we are going to go to the second part of the presentation. Is everybody clear on why we are Kemetic?
Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to go through some slides, because now we're going to go to the astronomical origin. Yes, sir.
Yes. So my question is to know, you gave a description of how the sun, the sun movement from the east to the west, and how as the energy of the sun rises, the same phenomenon is observed at the micro level in the brain. I would like to know, is it just for all the Kemetic people as an entirety, or for the human brain?
No, it's all melanated people. And you know, my brother, if I have a chance today, I have something I can talk to you about that. I don't know if I'm gonna have a chance today, but I have some slides, and I'll go over it. I go into the melanin and the impact of melanin and the lack of melanin and the calcification on the pineal glands and the other organs because of the lack of melanin. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is talk about the astronomical origin of Western religions and Eastern religions too, because I'm talking about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Can everybody see this? Let me ask you a question. If the full-term fetus that you see here is a metaphor for the full moon, okay, so you have the full-term fetus and the full moon, then what would be the metaphor for the crescent moon? Again, let me go back. So if the metaphor for the full-term fetus is the full moon, then what would be the metaphor for the crescent moon? So I'll answer it for you. The crescent moon, the first light on the crescent moon would be the point of conception, where the male sperm activates the female egg, starting life in the womb of the African woman. Okay, so in Kemet, life and light were synonymous with each other. So again, the crescent moon, the first light on the moon, represent the activation of the fetus in the womb of the African woman. Now, there's 8 phases of the moon. When the moon reaches the new moon phase, which is the moon completely dark, it takes from that point to the time when the first light is seen again on the moon, it takes 3 days. 3 days from new moon to crescent moon. According to our Kemetic ancestors, those 3 days was an incubation process that the male sperm was swimming in the dark, watery womb of the African woman, searching for the egg. So there is also a sun 3-day metaphor, because every year when the sun traverses south, it figuratively stagnates in the sky at the winter solstice. It stagnates around December 22nd, and then on the midnight hour, on December 25th, the sun begins to move 1 degree north. The Jesus story about being born on December 25th and the Jesus story about being dead and resurrected on the spring equinox is first and foremost a fabrication, a mythology. It never happened. Now, December 25th is the shortest day of the year. The least amount of light of any day in the calendar year is on December 25th. So if you have tall and short, and you equate that to the physical body, tall and short, physical body, the tall would be an adult, and the short would be what? A baby, right? You got that? Okay, so tall and short. December 25th is the shortest Sunday of the year. The shortest Sunday of the year. Tall, short. Tall equates to a physical body. Tall would be the adult. Short would be the baby. Okay. So this is where the white man created the mythology that their personification of the sun in the form of Jesus, the baby, was born on December 25th. There never was a Jesus. This is all mythology based on an astronomical event. This is the actual sun that is short on that day and is born on December 25th. So does everybody understand that? That December 25th is the shortest day of the year. Short equates to baby. It's the baby son born on December 25th. That's where the theology, that's where the white theologists created the story, the myth about the personification of the son Jesus, the baby being born on December 25th. It is a complete mythology. It never happened. It is straight up astronomy. But they took the 3 days from the winter solstice and they moved it to the spring equinox, because on the spring equinox is when daylight hours exceed nighttime hours. So, and this is when they said that the sun died for 3 days and was resurrected. They moved that to the spring equinox. It really makes no sense there, but they moved that there because of their ego and the fact that they think they represent the power of the sun. And on the spring equinox, the power of the sun begins to exceed the nighttime hours. Now, African people are never in competition with darkness. And we'll get into the whole Jesus thing a little later. But, you know, in Europe, let's say 1,000 years ago, it was much colder than it is today. And every year in old Europe, thousands and thousands of Europeans would be killed throughout the winter because of the frozen temperatures and the ice storms. But we, as African people, we don't need to be saved from the sun every spring equinox, because that's what happened in Europe. when the spring equinox came around, they felt like the sun saved them because now they can live. That's why they created the resurrection of Jesus at the spring equinox. But see, African people, we get sun all year round. So the sun doesn't need to save us. We are melanated descendants of the sun. We are manifestations of the sun. And there's always been a war between dark and light with Europeans because they always image darkness as the womb of the African woman. And they blame the womb of the African woman for creating the mutation in their genetics. And that mutation is the lack of development of the amino acid tyrosine and melanocytes to create melanin. So it's always been, with the Europeans, it's always been a war between dark and light, right? And that's only because that they hold the womb of the African woman responsible for creating their mutation, even though their mutation. So, but let me just add that I believe that the mutation, their inability to genetically activate tyrosine, the amino acid tyrosine and melanocytes to create melanin happened before the womb of the African woman. So, the light on the crescent moon, the light on the crescent moon was very important to African people. The light on the crescent moon represented the first signal in the cosmos that the creator purpose of human procreation was now manifest in the universal order. So that light was very, very significant, and that light on the crescent moon is the foundation for all religions, and that's what we're going to talk about. That light is considered an energy portal that funnels in the purpose of the Creator, or the African purpose as designed by the Creator, into that energy portal, the crescent moon, and then projected into the consciousness and subconscious of every melanated African person. That energy portal is called a netcher. Collectively, they're called the netcher. So the netcher of the crescent moon is called the netcher Yah. Yah. Y-A-H. Yah. And this is the netcher Yah. Now, there's also other pronunciations in Kemetic, depending on what time period the netcher Yah was written in. The AH on the suffix AH always stay the same. But sometimes the letter before the A changed. Sometimes it was Ah, sometimes it was Ja, sometimes it was Ya, sometimes it was La. So you see, in this writing, it's referred to as Ja. You have the reed, which is a J. You have the arm, which is an A. You have the twix, which is a H in the Metu-Neter language. Now, let me ask you a question. So, if a full head of hair, let me see. Oh, the sister right here, in the back. So the sister has a full head of hair. In America, we call it an afro. So if the full moon is a metaphor for the full head of hair, then what would be the metaphor for a lock of hair? It would be the crescent moon. So let me say it again. So if a full moon is a full head of hair, then the crescent moon would be a lock of hair. Now remember that the light on the crescent moon represents the sun at its beginning stage growing into the full moon. So it's growing. So the boy is in his adolescence, growing. That's why you see the young boys with the lock of hair. In Kemet, there were, and in all African traditions, there's always been naming ceremonies for the birth of a newborn baby boy, birth of a newborn baby girl. So the purpose of a naming ceremony is to give the newborn child, and it happened in Kemet 7 days after the birth, a name that aligned their spirit to their African family, their African community, their African environment. So in Kemet, 7 days after a baby boy or baby girl and a baby boy was born, there was a naming ceremony. For the boys, at that naming ceremony, once they were given a name, all of their hair was cut off and only a lock of hair was left. And when the child turned 13, when the boy turned 13, after ritual and initiations, they become a man, and at that initiation, they're allowed to grow their hair back. And then when it is determined through ritual and initiation that they are a man. Now this has been a traditional custom that has been passed down for 20, 30,000 years. Now this is on the wall right here. This goes back to 17,000 years. Okay, so you see Yah here. You see Amen with the lock of hair, right? You see the Shona boy from Zimbabwe right here, and that was just a few years ago. And this is just to show you that a custom has survived thousands of years, because one of the first justifications from colonization, as is African people had no customs. Now, let's talk about Judaism for a second. The Hebrew God is named Yahweh. Yahweh means belonging to the moon. That's what it means. It means belonging to the moon. The name of the Canaanite God is called Yarik. Yarik. Yah meaning the moon. Ra meaning the sun or the light on the moon at the crescent moon. And Ak meaning the Ankh, the light. So it's the light on the moon that projects light into the universe. That's what the Canaanite God means. Yariyak. In Islam, the name of the God is Allah. In Arabic, Al means the. La is a derivative of Yah, the moon. The moon. That's what Allah means, the moon. And Ramadan itself means burning light, the light on the moon. And all throughout Saudi Arabia and the so-called Middle East, city after city has statues of the crescent moon. Now when you look at the map, I'll just talk to you about it. The Babylonians, the people of Summer, and the Phoenicians. So the last invader was the Greeks. And in the Greek language, there is no Y in the Greek language. So everything that was Y changed to I and eventually morphed into J. So the Canaanite God, which is Yariak, morphed into Jariak. So in the Greek language, there's no Y. And the Greeks were the last invaders in this area. Yariak morphed into Jariak, which turned into Jericho. And if you go to the city of Jericho today, in today's Israel, in 2018, if you go there tomorrow, you go to the middle of the city, this monument is right there, and you can see what it says on the monument. It says Jericho, city of the moon. But remember, it all goes back to the Kemetic nature Yah. It all came from the African mind. It all started with Yah, because Yah was the beginning. Now, there's always been an issue about who was the original people of the so-called Middle East. And I'll tell you that African people were there in this region called the Middle East. They were there thousands of years before any non-melanated foreign invader came into this region. Now, I'm not just saying that because I'm romanticizing Africa because I'm an African. I'm going on the physical evidence. In 2013, there was an excavation by environmental exploiters and mineral thieves who call themselves anthropologists. And they dug up this miniature Kemetic, found at 120 feet underground in 2013. And by the way, the Kemetic, as you know, represents Heru on the eastern horizon, rising on the eastern horizon. That too is a metaphor for the crescent moon. Because remember, the crescent moon is the first light. When the sun rises in the east, that's the first light. Now they say that this miniature Kemetic dates back 9,000 years. Now, of course, if the white man says it, it's probably 19,000. Now, my question is, was there any Islam, any Christianity, any Judaism 9,000 years ago? In fact, there weren't any Arabs, Jews, or just Europeans, and Asians 9,000 years ago. This is strictly an African civilization in the so-called Middle East, dating back thousands of years. You look at the writing. The Metrimetric in the middle, right? Now this is the earliest form of Hebrew writing. Now it has already been scientifically proven that the earliest form of Hebrew writing is directly correlated to the Kemetic Metrimetric. Now the Hebrew language is an amalgamation of different Semite, which means bastardization, Semitic languages, but the most prominent dialect in the Hebrew language is Ethiopic. A lot of people don't know that. Ethiopia is the most prominent language in Hebrew. Now, first of all, these books, the Bible, the Kabbalah, the Quran, the Torah, all these books are not spiritual books. They are not even to be used as any type of spiritual protocol.
There is no spirituality in the Bible, no spirituality in the Quran, no spirituality in the Torah, no spirituality in the Kabbalah, no spirituality. They are history books. So I don't use the Bible for anything spiritual. I don't use the Bible at all. But being a researcher, being a historian myself, I have to see what they're talking about. So in the Bible, there are timelines. And in these timelines, it's a Jewish timeline in the Old Testament, it's a Roman timeline in the New Testament. It's not African history, it has nothing to do with the Bible. But in their own history, they tell some facts about African people. So for example, in biblical Amos 9:7, it reads, "Are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel?" It's in their book. That's not my book. I don't deal with that. But in their book, they tell you that the original people of Israel were the Ethiopians. So then the question is, where is all the African presence in the Middle East today? Why don't we see any African people in the Middle East today? And the Bible, their Bible, not mine, their Bible even gives you an explanation of why there are no African people, or limited African people in the Middle East today. So Ezekiel 29:14 says, "And I will bring again the captivity of Egypt as they return into the land of Pathros, into the land of their habitation." Habitation meaning origin. "And they shall be a base kingdom." So where's Pathros? You see Pathros right here. So Pathros is, if you look it up in the book. Okay. So we know that African people are the original people of the Middle East. Okay? And we know that they repatriated from the Middle East back down into Upper Kemetic. Then the question is why? Why did all the Africans leave the Middle East and come back to Africa? And the Bible even tells you that. In Jeremiah 46:25, the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel. First of all, there's no such thing as the Lord Almighty. There's no such thing as the God of Israel. Please, don't take this literally. I'm just trying to prove a point, right? I don't want you to think I don't want you to think I'm out here propagating the Bible, because I don't deal with that. The Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, is nothing more than the alter ego of the racist white man who wrote the book. That's who the Lord Almighty is. That's who the God of Israel is. The alter ego of the white man who wrote the Bible. So I'm about to bring punishment on Amen, god of thieves, Waset, on Pharaoh, Kemet, and her gods and kings. And on those who rely on Pharaoh, I will give them to the hands of those who want to kill them, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. See, that's why African people repatriated back down into Africa from the Middle East, is because they were dealing with a crazy white man who had all the military and all the weaponry to almost exterminate them. So being smart people, being their originality, their home base is in Africa anyway, they decided just to go back home. Because see, Nebuchadnezzar back in that day, Nebuchadnezzar was just like Cecil Rhodes. He was just like Leopold. He was just like Donald Trump. He hated everything melanated. So when foreigners came in to the Middle East and they seen these African people teaching about Yah, these foreigners called the African people the Yahs. Okay? Now, so the Yahs, remember the Greeks come into the Middle East, they don't have a Y in their language. So the Greeks called them the Jah. Right? The Jahs morphed into the Jews. From the Jews to the Jahs, from the Yahs. Yah, Jah, Jew. But African people were never Jews, because African people never called themselves Jews. Because in America, they might call me a nigger. Do I got to be a nigger because somebody called me a nigger? And you know, there's a nation, a group of Africans in Ethiopia who call themselves the Falasha people. The Falasha people say they are the original Jews. You know what? Somebody told me, I think Mark Mesher told me that there was a group in Cameroon who say they're the original Jews. See, here's my issue. My issue is that when you left Africa, you didn't leave as a Jew. So how can you be a Jew when you come back? So this group right here, the Falasha, say they're the original Jews. But look at their flag. This is the flag. This is the white man's flag of Israel. Now, these are the Jews of Tehran in the late 1700s. These are the Jews of Iraq in the early 1800s. So my point is that look how melanated their skin is. Look at the melanated skin. Now, how did these Jews turn into these Jews?